Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in Washington, D.C. at Fincantieri's offices to talk to retired United States Navy Vice Admiral Rick Hunt, former commander of U.S. Naval Surface Forces, who is the new president of Fincantieri Marinette Marine. Sir, congratulations on the new job.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to going forward and taking the company to new heights.
Absolutely, and thanks very much for writing that commentary piece for us, designing ships for sailors. In that, you try to make a very non-company specific argument about the characteristics the United States Navy needs in its new surface combatant. You guys are competing for that award, as is Huntington Ingalls Industries, as is Bath. Lockheed Martin has dropped out of that contest, but the Austal guys are still in there as well, with sort of the frigatized version of the Littoral combat ship. Talk to us a little bit about the foundational tenets. You know, you spent 35 years in the Surface Force, you commanded it, Surface Warrior, an 1110 of the First Order. Talk to us about some of the characteristics you think the Navy's got to bear in mind in getting this new ship, this new foundational ship that will constitute such a large part of the Surface Force of the future.
Well, thank you for the question. You know, one of the things that I'm very passionate about is what can we do in ship design? Really the first time that we've had in a long while, since really DDG 51, to do the right thing, to foundationally establish things that help our sailors in operational effectiveness in their preparation for fighting the war. To being prepared to exert lethality, survivability, and I'll throw safety in there as all key fundamentals that we need to be very cognizant of in any ship design. And so I came up with a list that's important to me, the first one being Maintainability Sustainability. I lived with that at Surface Forces. I wrestled with it at Third Fleet also, trying to make sure that ships had the appropriate readiness, the right operational availability of their equipment so they could go forth and do their mission. And I think that you can design that capability in. And fortunately, the parent design that we have at Fincantieri moving forward in the frigate competition, which is the Italian ASW FREM, has a lot of these characteristics. And one of them goes to sustainability. It goes to the equipment arrangements, the layout in the main spaces. It goes to the density of equipment. The upfront engineering sets the stage for interference removal required for maintenance or repair, removal routes that you'd have for upgrades down the road. Those are important factors that I think sometimes have been underutilized in becoming requirements on the U.S. Navy side. When you combine that upfront engineering with condition-based maintenance, doing maintenance work when you need it, only when you need it, using predictive analytics, you can actually cut your maintenance workload by about 50% and increase your operational availability of that equipment by about a 2-to-1 factor. And that's what the Italians are demonstrating in the parent design. So think about the challenges of the U.S. Navy. It goes to maintainability of the force. We have a backlog of getting ships into dry dock availabilities to restore the maintenance and readiness conditions of the fleet. To do that, you're going to need a new ship that has a much higher A/O than what we have in the existing way. And I think condition-based maintenance, upfront engineering provides that capability, and I think that's my number one priority to deliver that. Number two goes to flexibility of the engineering plan. So we have Codalog, which means I can use the diesels providing electric power to the shaft and or gas turbine providing power for increased top-end performance to deliver a very sizable amount of power. So our design is producing 12 megawatts of power. That, by the way, is equal to a Flight 3 DDG. And we have the ability to upgrade without significant changes to the equipment laid down in the ship. Another 4 megs on the diesel side, and we could actually go back and do what FREM is doing, and that's pull power off the gas turbine straight into the electrical bus, which is where we're headed. So as we go from kinetic to non-kinetic weapons, lasers in particular, we're looking for about 150 kilowatt laser right now. I think by the time these ships go to sea, we're going to be on the verge of 1 megawatt lasers. It's a 3-to-1 ratio. We need huge margins to be able to do that. We deliver that capability.
And just want to point out, having been underway on the FREM, I mean, one of the things that was very interesting was the accessibility of machinery and maintenance, clear avenues to get things in and out. Although I know that ultimately the design that you're pitching to the United States Navy is different from that standpoint. And I should also say that you guys did sponsor our coverage and our visit aboard the ship about a year or so ago. Talk to us a little bit also about habitability. Having visited European ships, including the FREM, there is a focus on habitability sometimes that the U.S. Navy has not paid as much attention to if you look at stateroom configurations, even for enlisted folks. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of that, because the U.S. Navy has done better historically, sometimes not as well, where people are sort of fit around the machinery as necessary. Talk to us about the importance of habitability ultimately for sailors, especially on long deployments.
So I think that's very important. I'll tell you, one of the driving factors that almost took me out of the Navy was the quality of life, or the lack of quality of life, that we had on U.S. Navy ships 40 years ago or so. We've come a long way, but we still, in most of our classes of surface combatants, live in 30-person plus bunk rooms. The millennials today don't appreciate that. And so the design that we are going forward with is primarily 4 and some 6-person staterooms, complete with shower and toilets, all the facilities that even when I was in a stateroom as a department head, we had a common a head area to do the shower and stand in line, and we eliminate all that. So I think it goes a long way to improving retention, recruiting. More importantly, people are more rested. They get a better night's sleep, less continual noise like you get in that bunk room. It goes to the flexibility that we're doing with circadian rhythm watch standing now, and increases operational effectiveness as a result of that. So these are doable. They're not expensive. They're the right thing to do for our sailors today. I think it's underrepresented in the requirements that are out there right now, but it's the right thing to do, and that's what we're putting forward in our proposal.
And also talk to us, right? I mean, you've talked about habitability, propulsion, flexibility. Talk to us about, I think you have 2 other tenets that you focused on your piece. Walk us through those other points as well.
Well, the next one that I would talk about would be adaptability. So we want to make sure that we are completely compliant with U.S. standards, and we are. We want to make sure that we give all the right combat capability that is required today, which we will do, but also the capability that is needed in the future. So when you think about more power requirements for improvements in sensors, maybe going active for electronic warfare, when you think about anti-submarine warfare and where we're headed there, or directed energy, which continually is going to require more and more electrical power, these are the right things. There's a huge emphasis in unmans. So one of the things that you saw when you were on board Alpino a year ago was they had an 11-meter rib with room for a 13-meter on the port side, 9-meter on the starboard side. We have kept that arrangement on the port side so that should the Navy decide that they're going to put unmanned vessels from the ship into the water, either submerged or on the surface, that would be an easy place to do that. And again, as you saw, they had a planning space behind Combat Information Center. We've retained that space so you can do command and control planning for embarked SEAL teams, perhaps a small group of Marines, but most likely unmans. We know that with distributed maritime ops, that's the way things are going. We need to account for those things now, even if they're not prescribed as a requirement, because we know that that is a need that will come forth within the next decade or so. We'll be ready to supply that.
Let me ask you one of the other ilities, which is survivability. The Navy is working on exactly how much survivability is going to be necessary for the future, trying to strike that right balance point. There's a concern that some of the European ships are a little too slightly built, right, that in the event that they get into a Fitzgerald or McCain incident or other sort of hull breach, that the ship can stay afloat. The Navy, U.S. Navy tends to design to a much, much higher standard than almost any other Navy in the world. What's the right balance point to that? Because there's a huge cost you incur in through-life support, pipe runs, electrical, whereas on the other hand, there are a lot of folks who say, well, listen, I mean, you don't necessarily have to build a ship to get T-boned, for example, by a 600-foot freighter at the end of the day and have to survive necessarily, although for both of those ships, it was kind of a close-run thing. Had the crew not responded as well and as quickly as they did, even with the loss of shipmates, they would have lost their ships. You know, what's the right way to think about survivability and where and how the Navy has to think about that, given that, you know, the United States Navy is planning and preparing and building a force to be able to fight that high-end fight if necessary?
So it's a great question. You know, one of the things that we went back and forth with Navy is to make sure we had that requirement right. Because you're right, it does add weight to the ship, it adds cost that could be spent in other areas. And one of the things that I would tell you is I think that the Navy requirements have it right. We are fully compliant. What did that cost us? From a European design to become compliant in the survivability area for the United States Navy added about 300 tons of steel to the ship. So whether it's bending moment or whether it's different protections, blast, fragmentation, that requires a lot of extra material in there to make sure our sailors are protected and the ships are tough. And I would say we are U.S. tough as a result of that. There was, again, an awful lot of give and take back and forth. I think everything looked at, evaluated by Navy, and then Navy came down and said, this is the requirement. Thou shalt meet that, and that's exactly what we have. And so I feel very comfortable. We have a very survivable ship with excellent damage control. Seakeeping-wise, I think we're the best in class. We exceed the requirements in seakeeping. You put that all together, and it's just a marvelous ship.
Let me ask you about cyber. I mean, obviously something that's very, very important to everybody when talking about vulnerabilities. If you consider, you know, application of malware, et cetera, there are folks who even look at it as, you know, sort of operational Navy planning, that if you were an adversary, you would want to, as we saw even in Ghost Fleet, right, where cyber, the novel Ghost Fleet by Peter Singer and August Cole, you know, talks a little bit about injection of cyber viruses and things. Talk to us about cybersecurity and how the ship really is going to be an extension and fits into the Navy's force-wide cyber unit that NAVWAR, for example, Boris Becker's new command is focused on, from, you know, all pieces of the information and cyber infrastructure of the ship.
Being able to work through a cyber attack, I think, is absolutely essential for any platform that the U.S. Armed Forces goes forward with. And certainly that starts with FFG-X for the United States Navy as they build their next ship. We have taken that very, very seriously. Again, we're fully compliant with Navy requirements, but we've gone a step further. So the guidance that we have with Raytheon as our partner, who is an absolute leader in cyber resilience, and said, whatever you do, make sure that the solution set that you provide gives us a foundation that can be continually advanced and evolved to meet and stay ahead of that threat. And so they've gone one step further over what they would normally do, which is to hit compliance. And they're doing it from a foundational approach to ensure we're not only good today, but we'll be able to, through primarily software upgrades, have that architecture in the frigate architectural framework throughout the ship to be able to advance quickly, efficiently, and very effectively so that we can stay in the fight and go against that cyber threat.
And a lot of this technology already exists, right? I mean, so it's not like you guys are developing from scratch any of this stuff.
Vago, everything that I've talked about so far is readily available. In fact, it's all in the FREM parent design that we are using. But more than that, it's capability that is either commercially and or in other navies operationally demonstrated, proven technology used globally. So these are not far stretches. This is not new, unproven innovation. These are mature capabilities that really our sailors deserve to see in the fleet now. And we have a wonderful opportunity with a new ship design to do this. Most of these are, in the HM&E side, the hull, mechanical, electrical side. When you get a crew on a new ship, combat systems is all new. Having commissioned a ship as the engineer expects to see new capabilities also. This fits the bill for that. Nothing unproven, all demonstrated capabilities. Any shipbuilder in the United States could incorporate these designs in their submission for frigate, for the large surface combatant. We could roll some of this stuff into the unmans as we go forward in that program.
But let me ask you just a question, right? It will take a decision on the part of the Navy to embrace some of these technological changes. We saw that vacuum heads, for example, were adopted aboard George H.W. Bush. I mean, they've had some challenges with that, but it's not a novel technology. Every cruise ship on the planet, and even most navies now, use that technology. But you guys, for example, on the Italian ship, have ventilation systems to get rid of smoke. You guys have very, very thoughtful immersion pumps, right, where you just drop a pump and it goes to the lowest point in a space in order to dewater that space, as opposed to the techniques that we use that, frankly, in some cases date literally back to World War II, including for smoke extraction, which, because we have a problem with large air trunks and things like that could be water ingress points. I mean, is the Navy thinking as innovatively as it has to in looking at this new design, given that any decision that's made here in 2019 is going to be on a hull that's probably going to be serving, if not for 3 decades, maybe even longer, potentially?
Well, I think we can always do better in these areas, and we need to take a look at all of them. The process that we had with Navy was interactive. They made decisions. I think some of these capabilities like those that you just raised are the kinds of things that after we win and we go forward, we can take a look at reintroducing to Navy, making a compelling case, and those things that survive that interactive discussion could find their way into the ship very easily.
And I should tell our audience that after you left the Navy and before you joined Fincantieri, you were a very senior Raytheon executive, and obviously, a tremendous company and capability when it comes to innovative naval systems, not just on the cyber side, but obviously the new missile defense radar and so many other weapon systems from Standard to Naval Strike Missile, which will be integral to the capability, that one in partnership with Norway's Kongsberg. Where are we on the program? Is the Navy still on schedule?
Navy's still on track. Everything is executing to plan. In fact, if anything, Dr. Campbell at PMS 515 has accelerated, certainly not just hitting milestones, but hitting them early. And so, as I think I mentioned earlier, the technical proposal went in last week. So we submitted that last Wednesday. It was due by everybody last Thursday. There is a cost proposal that is due on the 26th of September, and that'll kind of wrap out, round one. I expect there will be a good exchange of information back and forth with all the competitors, with the Navy over the ensuing several months after that, with a final award right now scheduled for July of 2020. And I think Navy's going to be able to hold to that schedule. It's a critical capability for the United States Navy. Fill that frigate gap, as I've talked about in the past, an absolute essential kind of ship. Again, I would tell you that when I was at Third Fleet, the highest in-demand ship was FFG 7 class. And you go, really? I thought it was the BMD shooters. BMD were pretty far up there, but the combatant commanders were looking to a frigate-sized ship to be able to do missions around the globe, and that was the ship that was the highest demand, and we've been without that capability for 5 or 6 years now. We need to get it back.
And let me ask you about your priorities as president of Fincantieri Marinette Marine. What are the top 3 things you're going to focus on in the new job?
Well, clearly to deliver the best ship possible to the United States Navy. I can't think of anything more important. It's really why I joined Fincantieri in the first place. And so we are all in and committed to giving the best FFGX possible. Hand in hand with that, we are looking to evolve the shipyard. That's probably a conversation later on what we're doing, but it's been great. We've called in the experts that are efficiency experts from around the world that do this globally for Fincantieri, and they've come up with some marvelous ways that we can be more efficient, more effective in our shipbuilding, and we're going to implement those. And we tell you a third area that we're getting into is sustainment. And so we are looking at satisfying some of the sustainment requirements to support LCS-1 Freedom Class, actively going after that right now. And so as you can imagine, Mayport, Florida being in the sights for a first step, and then frankly being able to support the LCS class across the board with a global footprint, and we can take advantage of Fincantieri and a global footprint for the parent company to support some of that. So those are the areas that I'm looking at.
And one last LCS question, right? Lockheed Martin decided, you guys are partnered with Lockheed Martin certainly on the Littoral combat ship. Of those 26 ships in the first buy, you get 13, and Austal has 13. Where are you on the build cycle? Because you guys are kind of approaching toward the latter part of the program at this point.
Yeah, we're about halfway through right now, and the last ship that we have will be LCS 31. After that, we'll be building some of the Saudi ships, MMSC program, kind of an enhanced version of LCS, and then rapidly into the frigate.
Rick Hunt, retired United States Navy Vice Admiral, who is the president of Fincantieri Marinette Marine and former chief of U.S. Naval Surface Forces, who's the author of Building Ships for Sailors. That's up on our website. Sir, thanks very much. Fair winds following seas on the assignment, and looking forward to coming up there to sunny Marinette, preferably in February, and checking out your operation.
We're looking forward to get you up there. It'll be great.